Hello everyone, today we will talk about the immateriality of the mind or the existence of the soul. Instead of trying to prove dualism, I'm going to take into consideration the arguments against materialism to prove that it's a false idea. So let us go to the point. But before, let us ask ourselves why this matters, why it's important to refute materialism. The thing is that if materialism is true, and the only thing that exists is matter, then things like truth, love, justice, goodness, all of them are false. They do not exist. There is no free will, no love. There is no meaning, and human life has no value. There is no morality. There is no right and wrong. There is no good and no evil. And all of life is nothing more than a nihilistic void. So as you can see, the love of a mother does not matter. The love of a man for his wife does not matter, and the freedom of men does not matter either. They are all the same thing. They are all like rods, nothing more than a collection of atoms. And that is a very deadly idea. Because this idea was the one that allowed the communists to do what they did, what the fascists did. Let us remember the Holocaust. Let us remember the gulags. All of this happened because none of them believed that there was a right and wrong. None of them believed that humanity had dignity, that people had souls, that people had free will, that people deserved to live, that there is right and wrong. No, they did not believe that. They believed that people did not have souls, that everything is only material. It's all about matter, and there is no soul, no right and wrong. So of course, these deadly ideas resulted in the death of millions of people. Let us also remember that Viktor Frankl, this famous psychologist who survived the Holocaust, he considered many of the evils of the world and pathologies to be a product of materialism and atheism. Well, atheism is not necessarily materialist, but materialism. Because, of course, it takes away everything that makes life worth living: love, justice, goodness. All of that does not matter. And a person can kill, and it doesn't matter because he didn't kill a person. He just killed a collection of atoms. So in other words, materialism is probably the most deadly set of ideas that could have ever existed. And to look upon materialism is to look upon death, because there is no reason to live, and there is only a nihilistic void under materialism. And this is why we have to reject it. Even if we had no argument, I would reject materialism because of this, because I love mankind. So let us go. Let us go to the arguments. No? But first, let us define the many positions that there is in materialism. The two more famous ones are identity theory and functionalism. But first, let us read about identity theory. Turns out that mental states and processes are just neurological states and processes, that is, they are states and processes of the brain and central nervous system, and the mind is identical to the brain. So there is no human soul, no free will, nothing like that. It's only the brain, and the brain is the same thing as the mind. Now, what is the problem of this idea? The first objection is that ideas are logically connected. And as you can see, many of the things that we will read comes from the book of this famous Thomistic thinker called Edward Fesser. So let us read. It is because one believes that catching cold is unpleasant, and that getting wet tends to cause colds, that one infers that one had better not get wet, and then draws the further inference that since going out in the rain, however pleasant, will cause getting wet, and one had better not be out in the rain. So there are logical relations between mental states that partially determine precisely which mental states one will have, if one has any at all. It would be logical to say that the neuronal firing pattern of type A logically entails the neuronal firing pattern of type B, or that the secretion of luteinizing hormone is logically inconsistent with the firing of neurons 6.92 through 8087. Neurons and hormone secretions have causal relationships between them, but not logical. So, in a nutshell, the problem and why the brain cannot be the mind is that the ideas that we have, they have logical connections, and logical connections are not material. You know, there, there can only be causal relationships. A causes B, but not that A has a logical relationship with B, and therefore it fires B. It cannot work like that if the mind is the brain. The second objection is that there could be minds without body. We can imagine the existence of an angel and divine beings. We could also give arguments for the existence of God. And if God has a mind, therefore, he doesn't have a brain because he doesn't have a body. The same thing applies to an angel. We could also imagine that there is aliens, but they do not have brains like the one we have. They have a different nervous system, let's say. But they do not work like us. They do not have the brains of us. So it will not appear that the brain is the mind. We could also imagine robots and androids with artificial brains made of silicon, plastic, and copper. However, if they have minds, then therefore the brain is not the mind. So yeah, this is the biggest problem with identity theory. Now, the most popular one, the most famous, probably the positions of materialism, is functionalism. And it says the following: it's not the stuff of which it's made that makes a particular mental state the kind it is, whether the firing of neurons or otherwise, but rather what it does, and in particular what sorts of causes and effect it has. So mental states are to be defined then in terms of their causal relations to other mental states, and ultimately this system of mental states is defined in causal relationships. That comes from the sensory body, the sensory body. So the idea is that it's not really what the thing is made of, what the brain is made of, but the function it has. And therefore, there could be robots with minds, there could be aliens with minds, and there could be human beings with minds with brains. But the other ones do not have brains. But they work the same way. They fulfill the same function. And therefore, they have minds. Now, let us go into the arguments. Let us imagine the China braid made by Ned Block. We can imagine, for instance, that an enormous number of people, let's say the population of China, could be mobilized to interact with one another in a way that exactly parallels the interaction of neurons in the brain. We can imagine that each member of the population is given instructions to do something similar, perhaps by sending signals to each other via walkie-talkie or cell phone, to the effect that people receiving them should either go on to send a further signal down the line or to refrain from sending one. So they are like copying the work of the neurons, right? So imagine that this whole population of China makes a robot. So when the robot is treating the chins, the artificial nerve endings in the legs send signals up to the radio transmitter in the robot's head, which in turn sends signals to a few 100,000 members on the walkie-talkie, and so on. They all do that. And then you have the robot saying things like ouch and rubs its shins. So you have the world population of China working as if they were neurons, okay? And you have this artificial being that is made by the population of China. According to functionalism, this being, let's say, should be alive, should be with a mind. However, that idea doesn't seem very intuitive. It doesn't really make much sense. It would be like magic, like poop, out of suddenly a mind appears out of nowhere. So it doesn't really make sense when we consider it. Now, the second biggest argument is qualia. And the qualia is the sensation of your subjective experience. For example, the pain of a headache, the taste of wine, the redness of an evening sky. That experience which you are having in your mind that is completely subjective, that we cannot find anywhere. We can explain why you are having that, but we cannot find that experience. It's somewhere in you, okay? And as you can see, let us go to this experiment, the inverted spectrum. So let's say that it seems possible that there is a person that is physically, behaviorally, and functionally identical to you, a clone, okay? It's exactly the same. However, he has a different quality than you. When you look at what you call red, you you see, yes, this is red. However, the other person that is exactly like you, instead of having the subjective experience of a red apple, he's looking at at green apple. Okay, it's the same apple, the same person. However, they both have a completely different, contradictory subjective experience or qualia. It seems that is possible. However, that thing is not in the person and is not in the apple. So it will seem that qualia it is not of a material nature, but of an immaterial nature. Now, the second argument made by David Chalmers, let us remember that David Chalmers is an atheist, he's a naturalist. He doesn't believe in God, he doesn't believe in any of that. However, he believes that consciousness is not material. So let us read his argument. He says that we could imagine what they call a philosophical zombie. And a zombie is a creature exactly like you, exactly like, in all its behavioral, physical, and functional properties. However, despite being completely like you, he doesn't have qualia. He doesn't have the, let's say, the subjective experience. He feels all of that, he experiences everything, but he doesn't have the subjective experience of you. And that seems possible that he cannot have it. So if that is true, then materialism will be false because that subjective experience is by definition not material. It is not something that we find in the world and we can describe in third person. It is always first person subjective. But it seems that it's possible that there could be people without that without that quality. Well, we don't know anyone, but that could be possible. And because of that, it will seem that we have properties that are not material. Now, let us go to the argument, the knowledge argument made by Frank Jackson. The argument is that there is this woman, Mary. She is living in a completely white room. She has never had the experience, the subjective experience of looking at color. She has never seen the color red or green. Okay? But she knows everything about the brain, about the experience of looking at green and red. She knows everything how that works. She knows all the facts that we can know from third person, okay, of how does that work. However, she has never experienced the qualia of looking at those things. She has never experienced color. But now, let us imagine that we take this woman and we throw her out of the white room. Then she will see the color, she will see the red, and she will see the green. and therefore she will start to learn something new, because before she didn't know what was to experience color, but then she knew what it was to look at red, what it was to look at green, the subjective experience, and therefore materialism will be false, because once again that new knowledge that she has now, it is by definition not material. Now, the other argument is the Chinese argument. Well, the background is that reason doesn't seem to be material, okay? Because we can know the world abstractly, we can understand it, we can understand mathematics, we can understand all of this in an abstract way, okay? So the point of this is that one could say that yes, but a machine could also do that. And this argument tries to say that such a thing is not possible. This argument was made by John Searle and is called the Chinese room argument. Imagine a scenario in which a person is locked in a room with a collection of Chinese symbols and a rulebook. The rulebook is written in English, and it tells him the combination of symbols to put together in response to questions written in Chinese and slipped to him through a slot in the door. Surely, the person that is right there, he doesn't know a word of Chinese, and the rulebook doesn't tell him the meaning of the symbols he's combining. It only tells him the effect, that when he's given a set of symbols that look like this, he should reply with a set of symbols that look like that. Okay? It is possible that Shirley could get so good at combining the shapes that a native Chinese speaker who is putting questions to him through this slot and is unaware what is going on would assume that Shirley really speaks Chinese. So what is the big deal here? Is that the machine is stopping us. It's stopping us how our intelligence works, how our language works. However, that doesn't mean that it truly understands what is to have reason, what is to speak this language. So what it's trying to say is that it's just stopping. It doesn't really, it's not actually reasoning abstractly the world, it's not experiencing the world, it's just stopping you. Like a mirror. Because a mirror is not a person. However, it's like a perfect copy of you. Now, the fourth argument is intentionality. The thing is that all human beings have intentionality. They all can choose. They all can give meaning to things. And we do not find that in animals. Let us read. In itself, a word, sentence, or a picture is just a meaningless set of ink markings and has whatever meaning it has only because we use it to convey a meaning. Because we choose it, okay? The intentionality. Brain processes, composed as they are of meaningless chemical components, seems as inherently devoid of intentionality as sound waves or impacts. Any intentionality they have would also have to be derived from something else. But if anything physical would be devoid of intrinsic intentionality, whatever does have intrinsic intentionality would thereby have to be non-physical, since the mind is the source of the intentionality of physical entities like sentences and pictures, and doesn't get its intentionality from anything else. It seems to follow that the mind has intrinsic intentionality and thus is non-physical. Okay, so human beings can clearly have intentions. They can have a will. They can give meaning to things that do not have meanings, like the numbers of mathematics. We are discovering the truth of mathematics that 2 plus 2 is 4, but however, the numbers 2 and 4 and plus, those are symbols that we use to understand reality. However, we only know that because we have the intention of that. Okay? So that would seem to imply that we can give something that is not there, in the sense that that intentionality comes from us, and it seems to follow that the mind has intrinsic intentionality and thus is non-physical. And also, it will prove that maybe the final trust is real, and therefore that God could be, God will exist. Because let us remember, in the fifth way, that we can arrive to the conclusion that God exists from the final trust from the Aristotelian final trust. Now, um, mathematics and logic. Understanding the Pythagorean theorem, or that Caesar was assassinated on the Ides of March, you and I understand the same thing in each case. It's not that my subjective understanding of the Pythagorean theorem and you understand your subjective understanding of the Pythagorean theorem. No, it's something that is true whether the existence of our minds. So it's not mental, and it's also not material. And this is true. The rules of logic, the laws of logic, like the law of non contradiction, that is true. 2 plus 2, for example, is 4. That is also true. Those truths are by definition not material. You cannot touch the law of non contradiction. The same thing applies to 2 plus 2 is 4, or that the triangle is 180 thing. So we have facts about reality that by definition they are not material, but they cannot be mental because they are not subjective. They are truths about existence, but they are like platonic truths, abstract truths of reality, like the laws of logic, the law of non-contradiction, in mathematics. Now, and finally, we have the existence of God. And if we have good reasons to believe that there is an immaterial intellect that has created the world, therefore, that would seem to prove that materialism is false. Because God is a being with no matter and no form, and He is a pure intellect. And we have many, many reasons to believe that God exists, like the first way, the second way, the fifth way, and all of that. We can know that he doesn't have a body, that he doesn't have matter, no form, he is intelligent. We can know all of this. So if we can prove that God exists, we will also prove that materialism is false. Thank you, everyone.